Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem, Racha Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is Talking Points for Edification. And pretty much, this is a title that came to me like maybe about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago or so. I don't really remember exactly when, but I wrote it down and we didn't have a title right now or anything to go into. But, you know, there are a lot of good talking points for edification. So I started to think about the situation with the debate that Captain Desire had with Vocab Malone, that devil. And pretty much I wanted to focus on that work, deal with that first and then take it from there, wherever the spirit would, take it. Because that is a very good talking point. And it's good for edification. Now, if you know anything about the word edification means to build. Edifice is a building, so edification is to build. And we are to build upon the proper foundation, which is Yahushai, beginning with the names of Yahweh and Yahushai, and then build this truth upon it, because what's being built is the church. Now, the word church goes back to the word ecclesia in the Latin. The word ecclesia, ek, is out, and ecclesia is to call, or kalim. So the church is to call out. And the church being built or edified has to be built upon the foundation of Yahushai. And Yahushai set it up already through his, apostles, beginning with the apostle Peter, how he wanted this truth to be taught. Now, back 2,000 years ago, when this truth is being taught and the gospel was going out, there was no such thing as, all people, or people teaching back then that all nations would be saved. That is a modern teaching. What the anti-Christians call the world Christian view. And pretty much that was never taught back then. That was not a talking point back then. This is something that was injected in there based off of erroneous reasoning by these devils during the time of the Renaissance period, to say that all nations could be saved, that the Lord died for all nations. And when you understand the scriptures and you understand, if you ask the question, why did the Messiah, or why did Yahushai come on the scene? Why did he have to shed his blood? Why did he have to die? Why? And then you go back to the records or back to the contract. It states that the first covenant, when it was dedicated with blood. All right. And after a while, the Lord did not want that anymore. If you break my laws, there's penalties to be had. And if you break this law, you bring this animal, sacrifice the blood to me, blah, 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 and you'll receive, forgiveness of sins. So the Lord got to the point where he didn't want that anymore. So there had to be room made for the second covenant, which we're not in yet, Yahushai made it of effect when he shed his blood on the cross, but it's not perfected yet. It will not be perfected until the kingdom of heaven, until we change, our hearts are changed, and the laws inserted into our inward parts. So that's the reason why he came. So when you go back to the contract, you go back to the covenant states that the Lord is going to make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that he made with them before. So there was no inclusion of these other nations. The nations were never given the law, statutes, and commandments. They were never given, the laws governing purging of sins. The only job that they had was the job of being servants, slaves. Now there are provisions in the scriptures where it speaks about how we're supposed to treat a stranger. And the average mindset would be, okay, well, strangers, that's talking about the other nations. But no, that's not the case. Sometimes it could apply to the other nations, and sometimes it applies to Israel. It depends on the Hebrew word and the context of the scripture. And when Captain Tazariak was dealing with vocab, the first thing he brought out was Matthew, I believe that's the 5th chapter, where it says, love thy neighbor as thyself, or, pray for those, or how does it go? Thou shalt not hate or love thine enemies. That's the one. And Captain Tazariak, which he was absolutely correct, went back to the law where that came from. And the law where that came from is in Leviticus chapter 19. We're going to read a couple of verses. But before we read these verses, let's read the first verse. And the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushai spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto all the congregation of the children of Israel, and say unto them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your power, am holy. That's why the laws were given to us. Holy means to be separate, unspotted. And what kept us separate? The laws, statutes, and commandments that the Lord gave to us to observe in the sight of these nations, so that they can laud the Heavenly Father and us for the great knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that the Lord gave us. So as you read through it, it gives you a lot of different provisions. When you jump to the 15th verse, it says, you shall do no unrighteousness in judgment. Thou shalt not respect the person of the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty, but in righteousness shalt thou judge thy neighbor. Thy neighbor being who? The Israelites, as we read in the first verse and the second verse. Thou shalt not go up and down as a talebearer among the people, which you have a certain group, I ain't going to mention no names, the IUIC, that do that against us. Neither shalt thou stand against the blood of thy neighbor. I am the Lord. Yeah, because when you tell the world that we're grapists and that we're bums and all that, or really with the part with the grapist thing, you pretty much are, setting us up to be looked at in a bad light. And that accusation could, cause one to be locked up and all of that. You see what I'm saying? So their so-called keeping of the law is hypocritical. It says, thou shalt not hate thy brother in thine heart. And this is the key. Thou shalt not hate thy brother in thy heart. Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor and not suffer sin upon him. Thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. See? So this is dealing with the Israelites. So vocab, that devil, he jumps down to the 33rd verse, which I had brought this out to, because my oldest son, he pretty much, we had a conversation on the phone. This was a few years back. And he brought the same scripture out in Matthew, and I told him that goes back to the book of Leviticus 19, and he did the same exact thing. He read the whole chapter, and then he told me, well, look, over here it says the word stranger. And then I asked him a question, and then he never texted me back. So, I just left it alone, because I was going to explain to him that word stranger doesn't mean that, and I was going to explain to him what it meant, but he never got back to me. So I just left that, alone. So the 33rd verse says, and if a stranger sojourn with thee in your land, you shall not vex him. So automatically, vocab jumps up and assumes that that's dealing with, that's dealing with all the other nations outside of Israel. And that's not the case. So you could better understand those of you brothers that live on the islands, especially Jamaica. I'm not sure about all the other islands, where Benjamin is at. But if you are a so-called Jamaican, right, that's born in America, the so-called Jamaicans that were born on the island call you foreign. So they say you're a foreigner, you're a stranger. That's why you can't really, have the accent. You speak with a Yankee accent, blah, blah, blah. So you're foreign. And this is pretty much what this means. Now, when you go into the origins of language, When you look up this word stranger, here it says gar. Now, there are many different names or Hebrew words for the word stranger, in the blue letter, or you could go to the Strong's Concordance, because before the blue letter, you had the Strong's Concordance, which we used to go to, and you could still get it online too, the Strong's Concordance, which is pretty much similar to the blue letter. I believe it's the same thing, but it's, in some places it's called Strong's Concordance, and other places it's called the blue letter, so on and so forth. So you have here a series of the word strangers. It appears 130 times in 124 verses, right? And this is in the, let me see. Let me go all the way down here. And it even takes you all the way to the Old and New Testament. And this is not including the Apocrypha. Now, when you go here in Genesis 15:13, and he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger. See? So the Israelites were strangers in the land that is not theirs. So sometimes the Israelites will be considered to be strangers. It depends on the context of the scripture. Now, in this case here, the word there is what? Gar. Now, what is Gar? What does Gar mean? When you look up the word Gar in the Hebrew, it just simply means a sojourner. Now, what is a sojourner? A temporary inhabitant. 3 times a year, the Israelites, the men, they would bring their women would appear in Jerusalem to keep the feast, the Passover, Feast of First Fruits, and the Feast of Tabernacles. For that time that they sojourned in Israel or Jerusalem, they were strangers. They were sojourners. They were Israelites, but they didn't have the same rights as other Israelites that were born in that land. There was a difference. That's why they had to stay in the inn, or they had to stay with, with relatives or friends or whatever the case may be, if they didn't have a place to stay. So 3 times in a year, you would have Israelites that came from, from different lands that knew they were Israelites to keep these feasts to the Lord, that would temporarily stay in the land of Israel. That's where you get your sojourners from, or your strangers, Gar. It says a newcomer lacking inherited rights. Yeah, because they didn't have the same rights that you had if you were born there. All right. This is why in the book of Exodus, dealing with the Passover, right? The 12th chapter, right? You had from about the 43rd verse to roughly about the end, it says the ordinance of the Passover, and it spoke about the actual heathen could not keep the Passover to the Lord. But if you had a stranger, right, he could keep the Passover if he was circumcised, the males. So if you don't understand the difference between all the different foreigners, strangers, aliens, you would think it's talking about the same thing. So you will get confused. Damn, what is this, a contradiction? Because in one part of it, here in the 42nd verse, 43rd verse, Exodus 12:43, and the Lord said unto Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover, or the laws to govern the Passover, how to keep it. There shall no stranger eat thereof. Okay, that's one. Now, when we jump down to the 48th verse, and when a stranger shall sojourn with thee and keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised. You'd be like, wait a minute, I thought he said the stranger couldn't keep the Passover. So how do you get a better understanding of this? Go back to the Hebrew, right? And when you go back to the Hebrew, you look up the word stranger in this one, where the stranger that cannot keep the Passover. When you look at the word stranger, the word there is nakar, and in some cases it's bun nakar, like in this one, and sometimes the word there is nakarya. So nakar or bun nakarya, 95% of the time is dealing with the other nations. Now, why do I say 95% of the time and not 100%? Well, that's where understanding comes into place. When you go to Jeremiah, right? Just to give you an example. There's many others. This is just one that I always remember. Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 21. This is not that hard if the Spirit is working with you. Jeremiah 2:21. Yet I had planted thee a noble vine, wholly a right seed, right? Because the Lord set us up, built us up. He built us up from the best stock, gave us the law, statutes, and commandments that would have made us immaculate and will make us immaculate. But, there was a flaw. We didn't have what it took because the Lord set it up that way for a reason. How then art thou turned into the degenerate plant of a strange vine unto me? So we know that this is dealing with the Israelites, right? So when you look up that word strange there, right? Dealing with Israelites, the word there is nakar yah. See? Nakar yah, which is we became foreign, alien, foreign woman. So we became foreign. And eventually what happened? We got kicked out of the land. And when we got kicked out of the land, we went into all different nations. In certain cases, some Israelites kept the customs, the language, the laws, the high holy days, and others assimilated into the heathen lifestyle. That's why the Apostle Paul said at that time, your foolish heart was darkened because you didn't like to retain the Most High in your knowledge. You preferred the gods of the other nations more than the Heavenly Father. So that's where that comes into play. All right. So when you see that word nakar or bun nakar, 95% of the time it's going to speak about the other nations, and 5% of the time it'll be dealing with the nation of Israel. I'm gonna see if I could give you another one. Right. This is Moses, Exodus 2:22. And she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom. Now this is dealing with the word gar. For he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. So now he's been a sojourner in a strange land. And the word there is H5237, which is this, H5237, Nakarya. So he was strange in a strange land. So sometimes the word Nakar or Bun Nakar or Nakarya can apply to the Israelites, depending on the context. All right. So going back here to Exodus chapter 12 and 43, that stranger that cannot eat the Passover is an actual heathen, Bun Nakar. All right. Then when you jump down to the 48th verse, the one that can keep the Passover, and when a stranger shall sojourn with thee and keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised. And then let him come near and keep it, and he shall be as one that is born in the land. For no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof, right? Because sometimes, even though you had Israelites that knew that they were Israelites and were born in another land, sometimes they would not circumcise their sons, even though they were keeping certain laws or keeping the Passover. But they would not circumcise their sons because they were, foreign. All right. Now, when you look up this word stranger here, hope I'm not losing anybody. Trying to make it as simple as possible. All right. When you look up this word stranger here, the word there is what? Gar. Right? And what is gar? The word gar is sojourner, a temporary inhabitant, a newcomer lacking inherited rights, because he didn't have the same rights as other Israelites because he wasn't born in that land. Now, the beautiful thing about this here is that you have the word stranger and you have the word, God damn it, you have the word stranger. Here we go with the bullshit. And you have the word sojourn. All right. Now, when we look at it side by side, right? It says here, Wakaya, Ya, Gawar. Gawar is another way of saying, or this is the way of saying sojourner. Athka, or with you, Gar. Okay, sojourn or stranger or sojourner. When a sojourner sojourns with you. So it should have been, and when a sojourner shall sojourn with you. And then that way you would be able to distinguish when it was speaking about the Israelite foreigner and when it was speaking about the other nations. Okay, let's see what it says in the NLT. If there are foreigners living among you who want to celebrate the Lord's Passover, a foreigner residing among you who wants to celebrate the Passover, nah, that's not hitting. This is the best one, the KJV. And when a stranger shall sojourn with thee. So an Israelite foreigner that's in this land temporarily. As long as him and his males are circumcised, they can keep the Passover. But an actual heathen, that's your servant, he can't keep the Passover, period. All right. And that's how you distinguish in this case here, and this one shows all three examples. It shows stranger as being an Israelite. It shows stranger as being another nation, a foreigner. And it also shows the word sojourner to be the same as gar or gawar, which is a sojourner. Then you have here in the verse 45, a foreigner and a hired servant shall not eat thereof. Now this word foreigner here, it's talking about the actual heathen. That's the word thawashab. And this is the other word that 95% of the time is used to describe a heathen. Nakar, bun nakar, nakarya, thawashab. Those are words that are used 95% of the time to describe the other nations. All right. But sometimes, 5% of the times, that word is used to describe an Israelite. This is Genesis 23:4. I believe this is Abraham. I am a stranger and a sojourner. See? And this sojourner here is the word thawashab. All right. And Abraham, although he wasn't an Israelite, but he is, because he came back as an Israelite, because he was of the line of the sons of God. And the sons of God were cemented in the name Israel. Yasha Allah. He is a prince of power. All right, here we go again. This one is talking about the actual heathen. This is talking about the actual heathen here. See, in this case, the word sojourner, the word thawashab is used, which should have just really been heathen. You know, you could go through some of these, and you know, you get the idea. Now here, I'm not sure if this is King David speaking. It says, "Hear my prayer, O Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, and give ear unto my cry. Hold not thy peace at my tears, for I am a stranger with thee, and a sojourner as all my fathers were." So pretty much, he is being compared to like a heathen, because he's a stranger to this world. Okay, so you could understand. And I believe this was King David. So let's check, see. Yep, Psalm of David. So that was King David saying that. And this here, for we are strangers before thee and sojourners, as were all our fathers. Our days on the earth are as a shadow, and there is none abiding. Who was this? King David, once again. Yep. Yep. So you get the idea. So where were we? So that's, you know, another point. So here the word gar, which is in the book of Genesis 15 and 13, thy seed shall be strangers, gar, sojourners. And where were Israelite sojourners in? In the land of Egypt. Now look at this. When you look up the word sojourn, it should be the word gawar in most cases. Genesis 12 and 10. Sojourn, sojourn, sojourn. Let's see what this one is. And sorry to disappoint you, you scoffers. This is going to be a boring lesson, so you can find something else to go start some shit, right? See, Gawar. Sojourn, Gawar. This video probably ain't gonna get that many views because, Jake is full of shit. They just like, the controversy. If it ain't controversy, if it ain't this Israelite group against that Israelite group, or this Israelite group battling a anti-Christian or something like that, they don't want to watch it. So pretty much the hell with you. Now let's see, back in Leviticus 19. So this right here, and if a stranger sojourn with thee in your land, you shall not vex him. This is dealing with the Israelite. All right. Wakaya ya gawar athka gar. And sojourner or sojourn with you, stranger. A temporary inhabitant, an Israelite. It says you shall not vex him. Why? Because he is your brother. He's an Israelite. But the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you, right? Because even though he doesn't have the same rights that you have in the land, he's still your brother. And when we go back to Exodus 12, and that was the other point, Exodus 12:49. One law shall be to him that is homeborn, which is the Israelite that was born in the land, and unto the stranger or the Israelite foreigner that sojourneth among you. You see? So what was the law for the Israelite born in the land? They were already circumcised, so they could keep the Passover. The one that came from a foreign land, him and his sons may not have been circumcised, and they had to be circumcised before they could keep the Passover. That's it. But it was all one law. You could both keep it because you're both Israelites, as long as you meet the criteria. All right. So back in Leviticus 19:34, but the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you, and thou shalt love him as thyself. Why? Because he is an Israelite. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt, right? We were strangers in the land of Egypt. We know what it feels like to be treated like a foreigner. But yet Jake still does that. And another example of that, just on a smaller scale, is in the book of Acts, the 6th chapter. Now these were Israelites that knew that they were Israelites, but the only thing, they were speaking Greek, and they were being discriminated against by the Israelites that spoke Hebrew. They were pretty much being looked at in disdain because they didn't speak Hebrew. Acts 6:1. And in those days, when the number of the disciples was multiplied, there arose a murmuring of the Grecians. So the Grecians, right, which are Israelite foreigners, well, actually not even Israelite foreigners. They were not Israelite foreigners. Correction. They were Israelites that kept the law, statutes, and commandments, but just spoke the Greek language. And that's the difference between the Greeks, which were Israelite foreigners, and the Grecians, which were Israelites that spoke the Greek language, against the Hebrews, because their widows were neglected in the daily ministration. So there was favoritism showed to the ones that spoke Hebrew and not to the ones that spoke the Greek language, even though they were both the same people. Shows you how Jake operates. When we look up this word Grecians, the word there is Hellenistas. Hellenistas. It says a Hellenist or Greek-speaking Jew. See, Grecian. So a Hellenistas is a Greek-speaking Jew. They knew they were Israelites. They spoke. They kept the customs, they kept the laws, they kept the high holy days, so on and so forth. But the only thing is that they didn't speak the Hebrew, or they might have spoke a broken Hebrew, but they spoke the Greek language a lot more or better than they did the Hebrew. See, one who imitates the manners and customs or the worship of the Greek, that's not true. because the reason why they were in Jerusalem was because they were keeping the law. They were keeping the high holy days. Okay? They weren't keeping the customs. They were speaking the language. That's it. And uses the Greek tongue. All it was that they were using the Greek tongue. That's it. And employed in the New Testament of Jews born in foreign lands. Ooh. Damn. Smite. It smiteth he. It smiteth thee. It smarts, don't it? So it says, one who imitates the manners or customs of and worship of the Greeks. No, that would be a Hellene. The Hellenista uses the Greek tongue employed in the New Testament of Jews born in foreign lands and speaking Greek, Grecian Jews. That's all it means. And this is another one, Acts 11 and 20. And some of them were men of Cyprus and Cyrene, which when they were come to Antioch spake unto the Grecians, preaching the Lord Yahushua. Now, sometimes they will use the word Greeks. Sometimes they will use the word Grecians. When they use the word Grecians, in the New Testament, it's talking about the Israelites that knew that they were Israelites, keeping the customs, speaking the Greek language. When they use the word Greeks or Hellene, those are the ones that didn't know that they were Israelites, that were following the customs of the Greeks. Now, how did that happen? See, these are questions that are never asked in these anti-Christian churches. Why is it that out of all the people on the planet, the only two that were mentioned as far as having any form of mercy for salvation were the Jews and the Greeks? What is that? Romans 10 and 12. For there is no difference between the Jew and the Greek. Right. So there was no difference between the Jew and the Greek. Why? Because they were both Israelites. The only thing was one was speaking Hebrew, the other one was speaking Greek. That's it. For the same Lord over all is rich unto all that call upon him. Now, how did this happen? It happened through the separations. And it wasn't just Greeks. It wasn't just the Greek language, because you had many Israelites scattered abroad that spoke many other languages. But the main ones that were coming to Jerusalem and keeping the customs were these Hellenistas, or Greek-speaking Jews. But you had Israelites coming from all different nations around the world, speaking all different types of languages. See, like in Acts 2 and 5. And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews. These were Israelites, devout men out of every nation under heaven. Why? Because we were scattered abroad, as it states in the book of James. For those of you that know, for those of you that don't know, you're going to know now. James 1 and 1. James, a servant of the Most High and of the Lord Yahushua, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. The 12 tribes are who? Israelites. Not the body of believers. Even though among the Israelites, you're going to have the elect, which are the body of believers. And this is why when you go to the contract, you can't fit any other nation. That's why you had to have supersessionism or replacement theology. Replace means you took something out to add something in. And the Lord is going to hit you, with the plagues of this book. And he's going to also hit you with that destruction. Now, when you look at the word scattered abroad, the word there is diaspora, a scattering, dispersion of Israelites dispersed among foreign nations. See, of the Christians scattered abroad among the Gentiles or the Israelite foreigners. So you have Israelites dispersed among foreign nations. Now you look up the word scatter. They changed this up. It used to be scatter, to separate suddenly and spread out in different directions. And that's exactly what happened. It's the same thing as disperse. The word disperse. To cause to break up, to spread or distribute from a fixed or constant source, such as disseminate, right? So they were moved, dispersed out of where? The land of Israel. as the Lord said would happen if we did not keep his law, statutes, and commandments. So going back to this, sorry. Okay, we're done with that. Diaspora. Now, this right here, which is the Hellenistas, which we read, there's another precept too. Let me see. There was one in Acts 11 and 20. It looks like Acts 9:29. He spake boldly in the name of the Lord Yahushua and disputed against the Grecians, but they went about to slay him. And you had in the same chapter, Acts the 6th chapter, you also had, a horde of Israelites. Oh, before we go to that, let's go back to Acts 2. So it says, and there were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. It says, now when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together. What multitude? Of Jews, devout men from out of every nation under heaven, and were confounded. Why were they confounded? Because that every man heard them speak in his own language. So these Israelites that came from these foreign lands heard the disciples, which were apostles at this time, speaking in the language where they were born. And they were dumbfounded. They were, they didn't know what to say. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? So aren't these Jews? Aren't these Israelites? Don't they speak the Hebrew language? Let's see what it says for Galileans real quick. The word there is Galileos, a native of Galilee. Right, and the natives of Galilee spoke Hebrew. Now, when you go back into the Old Testament, you had the common people spoke the Hebrew, but then you had the nobles that spoke the Hebrew and they spoke Aramaic. Okay, they were able to speak the Syrian tongue, which is similar to the Hebrew, but the common people only spoke the regular Hebrew, the Paleo Hebrew, because they were not learned. That's why I forget if it was Eliakim. It was a couple of men. When you go back to Isaiah 36, around there, that spoke to the captains of the Assyrians, and the captains of the Assyrians were speaking in the Hebrew tongue, and they were saying, "Look, man, we gonna do this. We're gonna smash you. We gonna, And then the nobles said, "Look, speak to us in the Syrian tongue. We understand it. Don't speak to us in the Hebrew tongue in the ears of the people." So the people, the average people, the commoners, didn't speak the Aramaic or the Syrian tongue. They spoke Hebrew, Paleo Hebrew, And I believe, it's just my belief that during the time of Yahushai, because they said that the people were speaking Aramaic, I believe during the time of Yahushai, they were speaking the Paleo Hebrew, and the higher ups, so-called nobles, the ones that were learned, were speaking the Aramaic tongue or the Syrian tongue, based off of what we read in the Old Testament, with the nobles were the only ones that knew the Syrian language or the Aramaic. Okay, so going back to Acts 6, 2 and 7, are they and they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? And how hear we every man in our own tongue wherein we were born? Right, so we're listening to them in our own tongue. And then it goes on to name the different lands where these people were from, and they were speaking different languages. They weren't all speaking Greek. Parthians and Medes and Elamites and dwellers in Mesopotamia. So let's go to Parthia. Right? Let's type in map. See what this one is. See if we could get a good better view of it. See the Parthian Empire here, which is all it is, right? What you can, it's a little what's the word I'm looking for? Blurry. Let's see, Parthia, Mesopotamia. I'm pretty sure I botched that up. It might just be one S. Mesopotamia, Elam map. Let's see what comes up. Just to give you an idea where they were coming from. There's Parthia there. Can't really, it ain't over here, Mesopotamia. See, with the Fertile Crescent. You have the Euphrates, the Tigris River, plains of Shinar. You know, then you had Elam, somewhere around here. So you had Israelites coming from all these regions here. Medes, you know, because you had the Israelites that were carried away into Assyria, you know, Middle Persian Empire. You know, you had Israelites scattered around there. Then you had the Assyrian captivity. You know, you may still have some stragglers from that, you know, from those Israelites that were brought to the land of Assyria, because the majority of them came over here to this side of the world, the northern kingdom. So you could have had a scattering of them in that area too. That's probably where those others came from. But mostly this was Judah, Benjamin, and Levi coming from all these different lands where they were scattered. All right. So let's leave off from that. Get rid of that. So now you see Parthians and Medes and Elamites and dwellers in Mesopotamia and in Judea and Cappadocia and Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia in Egypt, and in the parts of Libya about Cyrene. Now Libya and Cyrene are where? So-called Northern Africa. Okay. Phrygia and Pamphylia, that's in Turkey, if I'm not mistaken. You know, I haven't looked this up in a while, so. Phrygia map. Yep, in Turkey. Pamphylia. Phrygia, and then Pamphylia somewhere in it, right here, down here. So this was in so-called Turkey, the land of Turkey. Okay. Libya, about Cyrene, and Libya, Cyrene, that's like Northern Africa. And then you had what? The Alexandrian Jews in Egypt, and strangers, see right here, Egypt. So all these Israelites were coming from all these lands. And in certain cases, some of these lands, they were speaking Greek, and some of the lands, they were speaking the native language of those nations at the time. It says, and strangers of Rome, because you had Israelites that were strange in Rome. And this is why, you know, you had Claudius that kicked out the Israelites from that region. You had those that knew that they were Jews, those that didn't. Jews and proselytes. Now, why were they known as proselytes? A proselyte is a convert. A proselyte, you know, would be a Jew or Israelite that knew about the law, statutes, and commandments. They were following the Sanhedrin, which was a council of Pharisees, Sadducees, and them. And then they were converted from that to Yahushua. That's what it meant by proselytes. You have Cretes, which was on the island of Crete, and Arabians. So even among the Arabs, you had Israelites scattered in that region. We do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of the Most High. See? So they were speaking languages from all those different areas. So you had Israelites scattered everywhere, coming to Jerusalem to keep the Passover. But these were the ones that knew that they were Israelites. But in the same token, you had those that fell away. Now, I make this point a lot through the Spirit. Shalaki, you go to First Maccabees, right? 1:11. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with them, with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from thence, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward to him that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem, according to the customs of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief. So they were following after the customs of the nations. It was so bad that you couldn't even call yourself an Israelite. So if you couldn't call yourself an Israelite, and you were in the Greek captivity, right? If you couldn't call yourself an Israelite, what did you have to call yourself? A Greek. Now, the Pharisees, Sadducees, and them at this time knew about that history. The Apostle Paul knew about that history. It was fresh at that time. So you have to think that these individuals here, right? Jumping down to the 41st verse. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion, and sacrificed unto idols, and profaned the Sabbath. So here it is, 168, roughly around there, BC. Bring it up to date, where Yahushua around, let's say 30 AD. You're looking at about 200 years. So imagine this generation here that forsook the covenant. They had children. Their children were brought up in the customs of the Greeks, speaking the Greek language, having Greek names, eating the Greek diet. Then they have children, and they do the same thing to them. And they have children and do the same thing to them. After so many generations, they're going to forget about their Israelite, status, or that they were Israelites. And this is what happened. Matter of fact, see, and this is why the Apocrypha is so shunned by these anti-Christians, because it gives you the history of, what happened to the Israelites during the Greek Empire. And it gives you that history in Scripture about the Greek Empire, because the main focus that we read in the Scriptures, you read about the Egyptian Empire, the Assyrian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, but there's not much mention about the Greek Empire, because that was contained within the Apocrypha. So here, Romans 1:28, and even as they did not like to retain the Most High in their knowledge, the Most High gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient. And it started with what? Them worshiping the gods of those nations. Them worshiping the Greek customs, eating the Greek diet, speaking the Greek language, calling themselves Greeks. And the Sons of Israel and Caesar's Service, if you type that in, is a book that comes up. And in that book, it tells you that you had a lot of Israelites that were in the Roman military, but they're not counted or recorded by the rabbis, because a lot of them had Greek and Latin names. You see? So these individuals that had Greek and Latin names, which were Israelites, were not counted because of their Greek and Latin names. And the disdain of the Jews in Jerusalem for those Israelites that forsook the law, statutes, and commandments, the covenant, their heritage, they had a great disdain for them, and they just called them uncircumcised, heathens. You're lost. You're no longer a part of this. And that's why one of the reasons also why Yahushua came. That's why he said, other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. But his first mission was to preach the word, show himself to the southern kingdom, and then branch out eventually to the rest of the Israelites. That's why he came over here to this side of the world and presented himself to the Israelites here. And there are, there's for lack of better words, legends or tales that are taught by the indigenous people of this side of them being visited by a feathered serpent, which is Yahushua, Quetzalcoatl, Kulkulkan, which both mean feathered serpent, which goes back to St. John, the 3rd chapter, and it goes back to the law. I believe that was in the book of Numbers, where you had the serpent. That's why John the Baptist said, as the serpent was raised up in the wilderness, so shall the Son of Man be raised up. And when the serpent was raised up in the wilderness, the brazen serpent, what happened? The Israelites that looked upon him, they were healed of the bites of those serpents. Just like the ones that accepted Yahushua were healed, and delivered and sealed. You see? So going back to, we finished with that. What do we got here? Diaspora. Okay, we finished with that. So back in Acts 6, I'll start at 7 here. And when the word of the Most High increased, and the word of the Most High increased, and the number of the disciples multiplied in Jerusalem greatly. And a great company of priests were obedient to the faith. And Stephen, full of faith and power, did great wonders and miracles among the people. Then there arose certain of the synagogue, which is called the synagogue of the Libertines, and Cyrenians and Alexandrians and them of Cilicia of Asia, disputing with Stephen, because they didn't like what he was teaching. You see, they didn't like the fact that he was, because back then the Jews, the Sanhedrin, or the council of the Pharisees and Sadducees and them, they didn't like their authority being challenged. And Yahushua was not only a thorn in their side, but also on the side of the Roman Empire. And that's why the persecution came, the arrest, the banishment to Island of Patmos of St. John. Now, you look up the word Libertines. Libertines goes back to the word freedom. And I believe that was Pompey who actually freed those Jews from slavery, and they were called the Libertines. So it says Libertinos. Libertine denotes Jews according to Philo, who had been made captives of the Romans under Pompey, but were afterwards set free, and who, although they had fixed their abode in Rome, had built at their own expense a synagogue at Jerusalem, which they frequented. When in that city the name Libertines adhered to them to distinguish them from freeborn Jews who had subsequently taken up their residence at Rome. Evidence seems to have been discovered of the existence of a synagogue of the Libertines at Pompeii, which was destroyed by Mount Vesuvius. And the main thing that killed them was not the lava, but the smoke and ash. They asphyxiated. Okay, Libertines, Cyrenians. And you had the Cyrenians, you had Simon of Cyrene who helped Yahushua carry the cross. He was one of these members that came from Cyrene. But he wasn't the one, he wasn't here, riding with this, A native of Cyrene. Let's go back. Let me bring this over here. Libya. Images. Should have gave me a little bit more than that, but that's okay. This is up here. This is the Mediterranean Sea. You see Crete here. See here Cyrene, Libya. These were Israel, and then you have Alexandria over here, and this is Egypt. So you had Israelites that knew that they were Israelites speaking the Greek language coming from all these areas, coming to Jerusalem to keep the Passover. Okay. It says, so when we look up Alexandrians, oh, I'm sorry, Cyrene, we already read that one. Let's look up Alexandrians. A native or resident of Alexandria in Egypt. Doesn't really give you much. But these were Hellenistas. These were Greek-speaking Jews that came out of that area. And then you had Apollos. Apollos was mighty in deeds and in work, but it was the baptism of John the Baptist until Aquila set him, pretty much set him, gave him more ammunition, spiritual ammunition, dealing with Yahushai. And a certain Jew named Apollos, born at Alexandria. So he would be considered a Greek-speaking Jew. That's why his name was Apollos. All right. An eloquent man and mighty in scriptures came to Ephesus. Okay. Going back, let's see what else we got. Let me get ready to wrap it up. Libertines, Cyrenians, Alexandrians, Cilicia. Asia Minor, a region of Asia Minor, which I believe this is also in Turkey. Yep. And the Apostle Peter gave a shout out to the strangers. I'm going to leave you with that. Gave a shout out to the strangers in that region. Let's go to 1 Peter 1, but let me get this map first. Minus. There you go right there, Cilicia, Lydia, Sardis. This is all. It's a little blurry, but you could kind of make it out. This is the land of Turkey. Okay. So let's go to 1 Peter. Matter of fact, let me bring this back because you have something there called Asia Minor or Asia, which your Elder Makama goes into that a lot, which shows you that Turkey really is not considered Europe. It's really considered part of Asia. But Esau, they switched all that up. 1 Peter 1:1. Peter, an apostle of Yahushai, to the strangers scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. These are Israelites that are scattered in these regions. Strangers, parapidemos, an alien alongside an example, a resident foreigner. See, pilgrim, stranger. So they were, this would be the equivalent, the Greek equivalent, parapidemos would be equivalent to the Hebrew word for sojourner or gar. Demos is people, parapi is among, para is of, with, from, or side by side, among. Epidemos, be there, stranger. Okay, let's go to that real quick. Which is a compound word. It See, to make oneself at home. So what? A sojourner. An example, by extension, to reside in a foreign country. See? See how things become to be a little more clear when you start to look words up and start to get a better understanding of what they mean. Epi is among or upon, and demos is people. So these are Israelite foreigners or strangers among these other people. That's why, the wicked Pharisees and them said, where is he going to go? Is he going to go to the disperse among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles or the Greeks? Because when you go to that, matter of fact, says it came up, San Juan. And if you get bored, then move along, little doggy. St. John 7:35, and it's beautiful because it gives you, like, when you go to the different versions, it give you even more understanding. Then said the Jews among themselves, whither will he go, that we shall not find him? Will he go unto the dispersed? Once again, the word dispersed, diaspora, scattered. Who are that? Israelites. Among the Gentiles, the ones that are scattered among these nations, and teach the Gentiles or teach these Israelite foreigners. NLT, the Jewish leaders were puzzled by the statement. Where is he planning to go? They asked. Is he thinking of leaving the country and going to the Jews in other lands? Maybe he would even teach the Greeks, meaning the Israelite foreigners. NIV, the Jews said to one another, where does this man intend to go that we cannot find him? Will he go where our people live scattered among the Greeks and teach the Greeks? Right, those Israelites that were being called Greeks. Very easy. Easy. What else was it? That's pretty much it. So, with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. This has been, Lord's will, this will be a series, talking points for edification. And the Lord's will, you brothers and few sisters were edified. Till the next time I say shalom and water to all you brothers for all the precepts and the information. So like I didn't get a chance to read any of it, and Yahweh Bashem El Shai Brakathum to any apostles, bishops, elders, brothers, sincere brothers, and you sincere sisters are still hanging in there. Shalom to y'all, to your household. May the Spirit continue to bless and guide you. To the next time I say shalom.